OTB in 10. It is Final Four preview week, and we wait all year to have moments as gravitas as this. Welcome inside the broadcast booth. Sidebar here, League Nemesis in just a second. Wildcard weekend is historically our kind of wildest weekend, quite honestly. It's usually the weekend that we see the best quote-unquote games of the playoffs, both in terms of points scored and margin of victory being the closest. Wasn't the case this weekend, as the two squads that you might argue were the squads with the most momentum going into wildcard weekend. Certainly Waivermen with their league leading point total, and Greatest Show on Paper, who is top 3 in total points over the last 5 weeks, seem to kind of continue that momentum. Garcia, I'd like to bring you into this conversation. What stuck out to you as we look back at wildcard weekend?
Well, I had high hopes that it'd be a crazy wild weekend where we'd have back and forth, but it was both blowouts in both aspects. Again, Shipwreck's non-dynamic roster came back to haunt him, which he admitted in a text message late Sunday afternoon. So I was right there, and kudos to Greatest Show on Paper for running away with that one, really, within the first few hours of the day. Waivermen is who he is. He's clearly got the most potent offense out there. I mean, Derrick Henry is the man that's just going to run him to the title. That's my guess. And, I look at wristbands. I have to wonder if he really had any intentions of winning or advancing. Case in point, you throw $192 of your waiver wire budget at a player that you don't actually use, which I don't know if that was done for. I have no idea what that was done for. I can't get in that guy's head. I don't want to get in his head. All I just know is, at the end of the day, your guy did not go as far as most of my guys are going to be going in regards to Greatest Show on Paper and Waivermen. But I think it's just great the fact that really the biggest, craziest, wildest game on Wild Card Weekend was a consolation game.
Indeed it was. And perhaps you'd like to stay and discuss maybe the extent of your excitement seeing Kareem Hunt, the guy you traded for, defeat the guy you traded him from on Consolation Weekend.
Well, I think you just said it right there. I don't need to say anything else. What else is there to say? I mean, so many trades this year, and I probably had the best result of all of them. So kudos to me. I mean, I should get Executive of the Year trophy for that. It was a work of beauty in how everything just kind of unfolded. I'm sad that we won't be facing each other for a third time this year, where I think we can go 3-0 and chip away that what you called an insurmountable advantage in our 8-9 year history. So, but some exciting games lie ahead, both on the championship bracket as well as in the consolation bracket, as I get to face all aboard the Baby Bus, which is a dynamic duo. So let's see if I can slay that dragon.
Just one more thing about consolation before we get to the more important things. I think I will be remiss if I didn't say, note from regulators, he wants to make sure everybody realizes that the 3 players that he got in that trade did outscore overall the 3 players that you got in that trade on the consolation weekend game, even though Kareem Hunt did make the difference. If you want to comment,
I mean that's like out of your playbook, right? Let me just throw some numbers together to make it seem like I'm smarter than you. But nice try.
Okay.
I won, you lost. I mean, if you want to take that as like your little consolation prize and go home with it, you're more than welcome to. I'm advancing, you're not. That's all that matters to me.
A consolation in consolation, an Inception level consolation. But anyway, let's move on to the Final Four and this playoff bracket, because there is a lot to dissect here, and let's focus on the teams. Let's bring it right to it. We'll go to that championship chase graphic. So again, Greatest Show on Paper, Waivermen, those were your 2 winners last week. For Shipwreck, again, another postseason appearance, another fantastic season. But unfortunately for them, they are not able to break through, get themselves into the Final Four, and have the chance at that hardware. Wristbands, again, another year, another playoff appearance. Here's something interesting for you that we didn't talk about last week that I did want to bring up this week, and it talks, I think, honestly, about the competitive nature of OTB. With Garcia and myself having not made the postseason this year, that broke the longest active streak of consecutive postseason appearances. Garcia had 3 consecutive playoff appearances. I had 4. The current active longest streak for consecutive playoff appearances in OTB is now only 2. It's set by a few people, inclusive Sweet Home Chicago, one of the final 4 remaining teams, one of those teams. That's remarkable to me, but let's kind of continue, and we'll talk a little bit about the matchups this weekend. Now, it's again Sweet Home Chicago playing your lowest remaining seed, greatest show on paper. Phil the Thrill, your Fairways Division winner, in an epic rematch with Waivermen. More on that momentarily, but that will be a part 3 for that epic rivalry, renewing in the playoffs. Let's talk a little bit about Final Four records, okay? This is a look at the teams that are in the dance and how they've performed historically on this weekend. Now, the teams that are still in play, even though there are 2 that have won titles, they largely are not your, I would argue, legacy franchises with the respective Waivermen. We'll get to Waivermen in a second. But these are more or less, I wouldn't say newcomers, because PTT won in 2014, but they're not your teams with 5, 6 Final Four playoff appearances. It's interesting, and we'll get to the matchups in a second. Waivermen, for as much as they've made the playoffs and as much as they have a decent share of OTB records in their trophy case, has actually never had a championship appearance. They're 0-2 in the Final Four round. So this would be a big opportunity for them to break through, not just against PTT, their rival. We'll get there in a second. But also just in general to have their first ever championship appearance. So we'll shift gears. We'll head over to one of those matchups. We'll go over to Sweet Home Chicago versus Greatest Show on Paper. Sweet Home Chicago, of course, is your Gardens Division champion. Your back-to-back Gardens Division champion. Remember what I just said about how hard it is to make the playoffs 2 years in a row in OTB. Let's talk about the fact that Sweet Home Chicago, in a division with Shipwreck, in a division with 2-time winner Cincinnati, in a division with All Aboard the Baby Bus, a tough out every single season. Sweet Home Chicago has won the Gardens Division 2 years in a row. They play a Greatest Show on Paper team that is looking to go for their second title in 3 years and their second championship appearance in 3 years. Obviously, they had the season they'd like to forget about in between, but still, 2 titles in 3 years is what they're looking to achieve. Garcia, as you look at this matchup, Sweet Home Chicago versus Greatest Show on Paper, what stands out to you in this contest?
A lot of pressure on Ian. You don't want to be a one and done, especially in this league, because you'll never be forgiven for that. I don't like Ian's matchups individually. He's got some tough slates with Deshaun Watson going up against the St. Louis Coats, who can be a very sneaky, surprising defense, and they've had quite a streak now of, I think, winning 2 of their last 3 games. So the Colts are on a roll. The Texans are really just kind of vying for a draft slot since they've been so putrid all season long. And then it's the Saints with Kamara going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. That's a game that you just really don't like, and you got to think eventually teams are going to just catch on what the Saints are doing without Drew Brees behind center. So I'm all for Greatest Show on Paper. I think they're just on a streak. I think there is just that aura about that organization, as much as they've made some silly, questionable moves, particularly when they offer trades of players that don't exist on the person's team, making head-scratching decisions like that. But otherwise, they've been able to pull off something that people can't really fathom, the fact that they're doing so well with the quarterback from the LA Chargers. Though 2 weeks ago he looked kind of like, well, it's not the guy you want going into a playoff contention, but Justin Herbert has been surprising people left and right. So I like the chances of Greatest Show on Paper upending Ian's run here. It's going to be kind of a half-filled type glass situation for Ian. Nice run, great season. But we don't hand out trophies for the regular season. We hand out trophies for the championship round. And unfortunately, I don't see Ian going anywhere close to even look and see and smell that trophy after this weekend. I love Greatest Show on Paper, the running back duo that he has, Chubb and Aaron Jones. I think now that we're in December, in the middle of December, a lot of those teams, Chubb showed you last night that he is for real after coming back from that injury. So, and I like the Browns the way they've been playing all across the board. So my vote's for Greatest Show on Paper. I don't think it's going to be like a landslide when we did against the non-dynamic roster of Shipwreck, but I think it's going to be a close one. But I still think Greatest Show on Paper is going to be moving forward, and that's my prediction. And I'm perfect so far. So
I was going to say 2 for 2.
I'm looking forward to be 3-0.
Yeah, 2 for 2. So what you say maybe kind of goes right now, I would say.
It's how it works. I get people up into a position, I jinx them. And then I really let
Right.
those teams that I've always had belief in.
I got it. You're just hard on them.
I
oh yeah.
think it's great that you and I had the longest streak in terms of making the playoffs. And I think it's even better the fact that now you are back to 0.
Yeah, in 5 years from now, maybe I can restart that streak. But I will say that here's kind of the way that I look at Sweet Home Chicago versus Greatest Show on paper. And I've got some numbers on the screen that I'll throw up too as we look at these teams over the last 3 seasons. I kind of see this as the Respect Bowl in a weird way. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the history of OTB, if you look at the trajectory of where we've been over almost 10 years now, Sweet Home Chicago has not been the quote-unquote like legacy mainstay franchise in the playoff picture year after year. Greatest Show on paper still a newbie, right? Still kind of establishing who they are in this league. If you just look at the last 3 seasons, it shows you that they have had themselves, pretty good runs. I mean, Sweet Home Chicago had a very strong start to 2018, then tapered off a bit, and kind of waned out of playoff contention, but then followed up with these back-to-back Gardens Division titles, as we've talked about. They won or they got close to the Super Bowl last year, like in terms of they almost won the Super Bowl last year, and now really kind of led from wire to wire this year in the Gardens Division, en route to what they look to hope to be another championship appearance. Greatest Show on paper, they take the league by storm, so to speak, in 2018, but you could argue that maybe they didn't get the attention or credit that they would have wanted in that year, because I think they were like 5th in total points. When they were going through the playoff picture, I think they were honestly not favored to win the games they did. I mean, I think everyone thought that was Shipwreck's year, and they won, and they absolutely won. They got the Super Bowl, but then to follow it up with the 1-12 season, I think for Greatest Show on paper, it's like, hey, like this is our chance to go 2 championship appearances in 3 years. Time to start really taking us seriously, guys, because even though they don't have a lot of OTB records right now because of their newness, 2 is the current record for most championships won in OTB. They have a chance to tie that record in just 3 years in being here. So I kind of see this as honestly, hey, it's time for you to really start paying attention to me, Bull. Getting to another championship appearance, I think, would be big for both Sweet Home Chicago and Greatest Show on paper. As far as who I'm picking, and this might surprise you, I got to tell you, even though Sweet Home Chicago has done nothing but dominate, they've only had 1 sub 100-point week all year. I think Greatest Show on paper is peaking at the right time. I really do. I look at that lineup. It is dangerous from top to bottom. You mentioned Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb, but the combination of Cam Akers, DeAndre Swift, and hopefully Antonio Gibson. I don't know where the status for Gibson is. But there are guys that are breaking out on the lower rungs of that lineup that are almost just as dangerous. You look at Sweet Home Chicago, we don't know exactly what Alvin Kamara's ceiling is with the Drew Brees situation and the Taysom Hill situation. Kenyon Drake actually has come on strong, but there's a little bit maybe more weakness down the lineup card than where Greatest Show on paper has. So yes, as much as it may surprise, there are two analysts here that are picking the leader wire to wire to be one and done, and to see Greatest Show on paper with their 2nd championship appearance in just 3 seasons. And that's
I'm glad you finally joined the Greatest Show on paper bandwagon. And to your point, 2 years, the possibility of winning 2 years and 3 years is impressive. And it goes without saying the fact that it doesn't matter what you do during the regular season. It's how you finish. And Greatest Show on paper's finished really strong despite that horrible loss he had to me. He was able to wipe that off. And I'm looking forward to at least having a team with a losing record in the championship round. I even would love to see 2 teams with losing records in the championship round, because that'll really cement what OTB is all about, is that even if you're a loser, you're still belong in the championship round.
Think about it this way, though. If it is, I mean, we're jumping here, but if it's Waivermen versus Greatest Show on paper, you get your 2 teams with losing records. It would be the number 1 and number 3 team in total points, though. Does that not mean anything to you?
Well, then we should do away with all of records and just base it on points.
There it is, guys. One or the other.
1 through 6. There is rule number 55 that'll be on the ballot this spring.
Oh, man. All right. Well, it's interesting, and this is going to be a good matchup, and I'm sure Sweet Home Chicago has some bulletin board material at this point.
He's not playing against me. It is a game.
That's very true. All right, so now we need to talk about the rivalry, the matchup, Waivermen versus PTT. And before we get there, I will tell you, let's look back. Let's look back in the history of OTB for a second. And I want to tell you kind of how this rivalry, so to speak, began. Now, when OTB first started, and I was looking at creating rivalry weeks, which I thought was going to be a really interesting way at fostering or influencing or enhancing competition over the years and hopefully decades of OTB. There were some easy matchups that we could slot in as twice-a-year matchups. Obviously, your two co-hosts here, that was a natural rivalry that already existed that we then turned into a rivalry for fantasy football. Then I looked at matchups that were pitted, we could pit between guys that at least knew each other to some degree, knew each other well, and so then natural rivalries could then just kind of emerge from there. Think Kip versus Frankie, Ian versus Aaron, your Regs versus Gronk. And then admittedly, there was kind of like, okay, we've got some other guys here, and we'll just kind of patch them up and hope something happens. And obviously, Waivermen and PTT was one of those matchups, right? We put them together 8 years ago and said, hey, let's hope this turns into something. My goodness, how it has turned into something. Okay, Waivermen versus PTT, playing twice a year over the last 8 years. If you look at the numbers, and I'm going to put them up on the screen here, head-to-head, they have split their last 14 games. You may not know this. PTT and Waivermen were both 10-3 in PTT's championship year. PTT beat Waivermen twice that year. So Waivermen was 10-1 against the entire league, but 10-3, but 0-2 against PTT, and therefore 10-3 overall. And back then, points, even though Waivermen had more points was not the tiebreaker back then. It was head-to-head matchup. So PTT got the first round bye because of that, ended up winning their championship because of that. Even though Waivermen has made the playoffs more, PTT has been the thorn in their side. Case in point, PTT has swept the season series this year. They beat Waivermen in week 4. They beat Waivermen in week 13. Effectively, they were the reason that Waivermen was not in a Final Four seed and that Waivermen did not have a winning record and really kind of further substantiate that first in total points position. This is amazing to me, and it feels like if one of these guys is going to advance to the Super Bowl, it is poetic that they play each other, and this is the moment. Who will break through? We just saw PTT beat Waivermen just 2 weeks ago. Garcia, what do you think about this legendary Part 3, Chapter 3 in just one season of this matchup?
I guess if you told me the Bills were going to go and put a beating on the Pittsburgh Steelers without the help of Devin Singletary, I would have believed it because he sucks. But if you told me Josh Allen has been able to just have the season he is, and even against a defense as good as the Pittsburgh Steelers, I would question that because I got to eventually think that there's going to be a drop-off. Not a massive drop-off, but nothing to what he's been able to perform week in, week out. PTT has been riding the Josh Allen train all season long. I can't even tell you who else he has on his roster. Michael Thomas, because of the fact that Michael Thomas was actually out more than when he's produced on the field. So there's two players. Everyone else, I have no clue. Maybe he's got David Johnson, maybe he's got Duke Johnson. I don't know. No, he doesn't.
That's not
in your head. He doesn't have A. Johnson on his team. Nor does he have Ty Johnson because wristband spent $192 to have him on his roster. But I digress. It's great to see the fact that a rivalry of this nature has really kind of taken over, this season. And again, it's impressive the fact that these guys, although you just pit them together just because you had nothing else better to do or couldn't find another person to pit them against, it's great to see that there's something going on here that we may not appreciate, but I hope they appreciate, much like how you and I battle each other against each other in and out when it comes to, when it matters, really. So I am a fan of Waivermen. I think what he's been able to do all season long, he's had some heartbreaking, tough losses when it comes to wins and losses, but the points speak for themselves. I mean, he's not a 6-7 team, and in some ways he's probably more like a 10-3 team. He's certainly up in the Ian echelons of wins-loss records. I'm going to tell you right now, Waivermen is going to the title game. As much as I know PTT's been able to pull off some miracles and run the Josh Allen train, it's Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf. He's got the right Indianapolis Colts running back, in my opinion, not the guy that Ian has. So he can thank you for that.
He can. It's about that time. And so I kind of dovetail with your point. And when you look at his lineup, it's not to say that PTT can't beat him because he just did 2 weeks ago. But when you look at the lineup, Russell Wilson, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Adam Thielen, DK Metcalf. There are 5 guys on that lineup that can literally go off, and you almost expect to go off every single week. Now that Jonathan Taylor has joined that fold and finally broke out like the league winner we all hoped he would be at the beginning of the year, no reason to dwell on that. Top 10 running back over the last month. Anyway, let's put that aside. I think that's too many players for PTT to jump over. Now, granted, they've done it. They have done it. But when you look at PTT's lineup, you see Josh Allen. You maybe see Michael Thomas to a degree, at least from a high floor perspective. You see Travis Kelce. After that, they do require somebody else probably to have a big week, or maybe someone from Waivermen or a couple players from Waivermen to have, maybe a lower week. But it's tough for me to see it happening 3 times in this year. Kudos to PTT if they can make it happen 3 times. And by the way, it was never a situation where Waivermen didn't put up points. They beat them 129-114 in week 4. They beat them 115-113-ish in week 13. So it isn't like PTT just caught Waivermen in a bad week. PTT brought it in the last 2 times. Can he do it again? I'm going to say he can't. I'm going to say Waivermen is going to find a way in this quintessential hero's journey tale. This is their dragon. This is their demon. They've got to exercise it, all these things. They've never made a championship appearance. This would be so apropos for them to make that championship appearance by beating PTT. And I do think that they've got the lineup to do it. And so our picks are identical this week, unfortunately. Or fortunately, since you were 2-0 last week, I shall pick Waivermen as well.
And I think you'll be right. No disrespect to PTT. I think if this is the case, again, if you go on the wins-loss records like a majority of the world goes off, one would say, well, Ian and PTT would be up there. But we don't follow those cardinal rules of fantasy football for that matter. So I like the chances of us reevaluating the win-loss situation and really kind of just doing away with it entirely next year. I'll get that on the ballot. I think it's going to be important. We just go to a point total system and just leave it at that.
I'm just confused because 5 weeks ago you were all about win-loss record, and it should only be win-loss record. And so now I just want to make sure that we have it on record on the film that you are pivoting and now you are all points.
Records at all. So when you go on the league page, there's no W, no L. It's just a points.
Here's the thing, and we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago. If you want to say it one way, are you basically suggesting, because of the fact that you're saying it's just points, has Waivermen already won this year because they've already or through 13 weeks through the significant sample size they had the most points? Are they the winner for you in your eyes in OTB already?
Well, I don't want to jump the gun here. I'm yet not deciding who my championship winner will be, but I want to focus on the fact that I still believe we should do away with wins and losses and just stick to total points.
All right. Well,
and the point total, it'd be great just to have that league page, just have the points. And then the beauty of it is when we have our recaps, you can't say somebody won or lost. You just say, oh, you had fewer points than the other team. So that's how the dialogue would be. We'd never say either the words win or loss.
It feels a little bit too much for me. As you know, I think the entertainment comes in pitting teams together and having those rivalries develop and having something that somewhat resembles a professional football.
So what you're saying is you want a win-loss record.
I want both. I want a little bit of win-loss. I want a little bit of point.
I don't get it.
Look.
All right, wrap it up because I'm losing my audio here.
Here's Garcia out on the West Coast with a constantly changing array of ballot items to look forward to in the offseason. Sidebar here on the East Coast. Best of luck to our Final Four competitors. Of the 4 teams in, you've got your 3 teams that are leading in total points. So you can't say that we could get a better Final Four, at least in terms of quality of point performance all year. Best of luck to them in their one-game eliminations. We'll see who we're talking about next week in our Super Bowl preview.